Hello and welcome to ICS Arabia podcast. Today is very special. I have three special guests for the first time. I normally have one guest, maximum two, but today we're a full house. um, so I don't know where to start, guys. Can you introduce yourself? Feel free and tell us what do you do, where do you work. So please.
Okay, shall I kick off? So
Sure.
my name's Rob from the Netherlands, and I am the creator of Soc-Cmm, a open standard for measuring capability maturity in security operations centers. So my day-to-day work is managing everything around this. So from the support partners that Soc-Cmm has to the certification that Soc-Cmm has created to trainings and also creation of new resources for the SOC community. I'll hand it over to Jan.
Okay, hello everyone. My name is Jan Kopřiva. I'm from the Czech Republic. I work for a company called Metals Consulting. We are a partner of Soc-Cmm, so we use the Soc-Cmm model to evaluate SOCs and advise them in terms of how they can increase their maturity and capabilities. And we also deliver services related to OT, be it tests, as in security tests, or be it, once again, advisory related to increasing their security. Go ahead, Chris.
Great. So Christopher Crowley, you can call me Chris. It's easier. I work as an instructor. I do research on security operations and as a consultant to a number of different organizations across the world, working with them to help to enhance the maturity and capability that they have in their security operations.
Oh, nice. Welcome, guys. Thank you. So you guys mainly, most of you deal with SOC. That's it, right? Or
yeah, you could say that. Yeah, I think we're all heavily involved in security operations. I think we're all trainers as well, if I'm not mistaken. So we all train people in how you can best run your security operations centers as well.
So why do you think? Or what made you focus on SOC? So what was the motivation? What did you see in the community?
I'll go first. I'll go first if you don't mind. I was working as the incident response manager for a U.S. government agency level nationwide monitoring capability. And I have a lot of technical background and capability, but what I was finding was it didn't matter how good we were technically, the larger concept of operations continued to fail us, and from a technical perspective, and it continued to fail the organization. Nobody felt like they were getting what they wanted, and I realized there was this thing that needed to be solved, and it's what security operations is supposed to actually provide. So.
Okay. And so do you think the current SOCs, let me say this statement, why most SOCs fail?
Maybe Jan, can you comment?
Okay, I'll take this one.
Okay.
To my mind, the old saying about security being made up of people, processes, and technologies holds. And unfortunately, lots of companies out there still think that security, be it security operations or anything else, is mostly about technologies, which is obviously not the case. They are willing to invest into EDRs, IPSs, and what have you, but investing in people and processes who would manage the technology and make sure that it works the way it's supposed to is something not all of them do in high enough or on high enough level. So to my mind, this disconnect between technologies and the remaining two pillars is where things usually break down.
Oh, okay. You have an opinion, Rob, about that? Or?
Yeah, I think Jan is right. So SOCs are, you can approach them like just focusing on the technology. And this is what often happens where technology is leading. While actually what we should be doing is thinking of how do we add value to the business. So how do we make sure that what we're doing actually provides added value to the organization instead of just being focused on that technology? So I always say technology comes last. Once you've decided what you're going to be doing, like the mission, the vision, strategy, the people that you need, the processes need to be in place, and the services you need to deliver, and then you can decide what technologies do I then need to deliver what I need to deliver. But it doesn't start with technology; it ends with technology. So it's sort of what we see when it fails. It fails because you take the wrong starting point. You don't start with asking yourself what's the business value, what's the added value. You start with what kind of fancy technology can I put in place, and that's just a recipe for failure, I think.
So you think the companies, when they buy SOCs or technologies, they think it's like a false sense of security. You think this is or maturity? Yeah, Chris.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think that most organizations actually don't know what they're getting when they think about security operations. They start from some mandate or some perception in the environment that this is a thing that we need, and they don't have a concept of what it's supposed to provide in terms of value. And then the security operations center or team and whatever they build, they fail to explain what the value is that they're delivering. And this is a thing that I've spent a lot of time thinking about and trying to articulate and quantify, and I'm writing some things on this unrelated to Soc-Cmm, but just in the research that I've been doing for a while, I'm attempting to provide a quantification schema in order to demonstrate value. But here's the real challenge of demonstrating value in cybersecurity operations. We're saying we provided value because a bad thing didn't happen. So how do I account for that? How do I account for my actions and expenditures resulting in not profit, not not some tangible outcome, but in an outcome not occurring? And so this becomes speculation. Most people don't think about that as this is what you're procuring when you go and seek a SOC. And then most people who are struggling to deal with the daily churn of tickets and vulnerabilities and such, they really don't have the concept of providing a strategic valuation to the organization so the organization knows what it is that they're doing. And this is a big failure. This is a big failure.
Okay, so
I would
sure.
Take it one step further. Chris mentioned strategic level, but even on the operational and tactical level, most organizations aren't actually sure whether their SOCs are monitoring what they are supposed to be monitoring, or rather, no one actually asked that question. The question is, do you have a SOC which covers your OT environment? The answer is yes. Does it cover what you need to see in the OT environment? Only God knows, because no one actually has done the legwork. No one has done any threat modeling. No one has said, these are the use cases we need to cover. So the false sense of security is there. And most SOCs lack the ability to quantify what they see and whether, as Rob and Chris both rightly said, it satisfies the strategic requirements, the business requirements of the organization, but also if it requires the tactical and operational requirements.
Oh, okay. I get it. So from your experience, do you think, what's the percentage? Are there, like most of organizations, they don't have, they have this problem, you think?
I think so, yeah. So one of the questions, we recently did a survey, a SOC maturity survey that was recently closed. And one of the questions is regarding the OT environment specifically, how do you monitor your OT environment? Now, there is a portion, of course, that just says we don't have an actual OT environment, but there's also a small portion, I think about 8% of people, 8% of respondents to be exact, that just indicate what we don't monitor the OT environment at all. And then there's the ones that do monitor have various ways of monitoring it. So sometimes this is a fully converged approach where they have one SOC that deals with both IT as well as OT. Sometimes it's a fully separated SOC, so we have an IT SOC and then we have a separate OT SOC, and sometimes it's a mixture. So, for example, we do have different technologies to monitor the OT environment from the IT environment, but we use the same people. So there's all kinds of variation in there, and there doesn't seem to be a very strong preference for any of these. We looked into this because we were writing, the three of us. We were actually was also a fourth partner involved as well. But we were writing a paper, a white paper, which is going to be published right after this podcast. So on assessing SOC maturity in OT SOCs. So specifically, that's what we were focusing on. So this was one of the topics. How do you set up your SOC, and how does that affect the way you approach maturity, and how you approach assessing the effectiveness of the SOC?
And
Yeah.
if I can
Yeah, sure.
add on to that about something you said 80%, and you were of course picking a number to drive it. I have for years tried to come up with a count of how many SOCs there are in the world, and that alone is a challenging thing to do, especially if you're taking a global perspective. And I, as a US centric kind of thinker, but still with a lot of exposure to GCC and European and Asian markets, I feel like there's a huge blind spot for me in terms of the Chinese and the Russian markets, in terms of what are people doing in Russia related to security operations. It's very difficult for me to say. So it's sort of like, also you have this problem of, we don't understand what the population is, and then most of that population is not really willing to share the status of their defensive posture. This is another huge challenge. And so there are two different surveys here. One is the Soc-Cmm survey. Another one is a survey that I work on. And in both of them, we constantly have this challenge of, we are in an echo chamber. We know a large number of entities, but I don't think it really is accounting for the global population. It's only a sampling of the global population that we can speak to. It's a real challenge when you're trying to have some sort of hard statistical quantitative expression of how people are doing. So,
yeah, that's true. And one of the things that I'd like to add to that is, we also ask in the maturity survey, we ask, do you use Soc-Cmm? Now, a large portion of the people who respond actually already use Soc-Cmm. So those are the SOCs, the population SOCs that are interested in SOC maturity. And then there's a large population of SOC that they don't even understand the concept of SOC maturity. So they have no knowledge of any of the frameworks that exist in this area. So I think that's a big blind spot that exists, that we just don't know, and it's very hard to reach them. And I don't know about Chris and Jan, but I think one of the major things of a SOC is you need to have some level of trust in that they're doing the right things, that they're doing things correctly. This is true for both when you run it yourself, but also when you insource it with an MSSP. You can go to an MSSP and say, give me your SOC service, but what's the quality of that? It's very hard to quantify it, and that's I think a very interesting topic as well.
Yeah, I would love to know. I mean, if you're willing to share, how would you quantify, or the metrics to quantify a mature SOC? We
do have, of course, a Soc-Cmm methodology to assess maturity and capability. You can do that yourself through self-assessment. That was it was designed to do. But we also see a big discrepancy with people doing it themselves and not fully understanding what a mature SOC looks like, and then overestimating their own maturity. This is also something that's quite common. And on the other side, we also have a certification which is quite popular at the moment especially in Saudi Arabia. So there's a number of SOCs that already have been certified, which is an independent audit. So this is, I would say, a good mark of quality. And because Soc-Cmm is quite complete in terms of, we look at business, we look at people, we look at process, we look at technology, we look at services, it's quite complete. I would say this at least gives you a certain level of trust that what's being done within the Security Operations Center actually makes sense.
And one other thing I want to add to that is, all of us that are here do these maturity assessments. And I think that each of us would further acknowledge that it is largely a conversational paper exercise, and the corresponding actual testing is outside of the scope of the maturity assessment and the capability assessment. And so running a pen test or a purple team or any of those sorts of things, even the demonstration of the tactical validation of a detection working across a large number of systems, is not done very frequently. Now, there are questions about your validation of those detections, but we're not double checking it as we're doing the maturity assessment. And this is something that is a capability that we want every SOC to have. But in fact, oftentimes just having the detections in place, as Jan rightly pointed out earlier, is enough of a challenge, let alone the double check that it's working in an automated way, so that you can rest assured that, the data that's supposed to be coming through is coming through and being delivered in the pipeline. And then my analysts who are working 9 to 5 or 24 hours a day or 9 to 5 plus augmentation using a third party and off hours, that all of that works consistently every day of the year is a very difficult thing for anybody to actually assert that they're confident that that's the operational status.
Agreed. And there are absolute limits that you have even when you do a certification, because you only have so much time to look at the SOC. And if you want to look at all the aspects and look at all their operational status across like a long period of time, that's something, there's limits to what you can do with it within an audit. So I think a combination of doing assessments or getting certified in an audit with the operational activities that Chris just, and I think Jan, you mentioned with your introduction, the sort of pen testing that you do as well on OT environments and that sort of thing, that sort of validation, while it's part of the certification asking, do you do any validation? What does it look like? There's a lot of differences. Even if you do it, you can do it the right way, you can do it the wrong way. So there's still a lot of variation there. And I think probably Jan can tell a little bit more about how to do it the right way, I suppose.
I think that probably most people listening to us will have some idea how to do it the right way. I would perhaps point out one wrong way, which I've seen before, which was we basically test whether the rule fires because this is the string which is searched for by the rule in this specific type of log. So it doesn't really check for the technique which the rule should cover. It was basically just a regex exercise, nothing more. So that's obviously the wrong way to do it. The right way to do it would be, in ideal world, to emulate the technique or the specific attack path or attack approach which the detection should cover. But since we're talking about OT, or this is an OT podcast, I would say that there we have further stumbling points in us not being able to emulate lots of things on the infrastructure itself. So there, I would say we're fairly limited in what we actually can validate on production systems, at least. On test systems, it's obviously different.
Can I speak to a specific instance of a customer of mine in the power sector in North America? And in the maturity assessment that I did with them a couple of years ago, there was the thing that I pointed out was they had, as a team, almost no way to test anything. And this was something that we agreed was a good thing for them to have as a objective to increase their capability for testing. Well, 2 years later, it's really hard for them to do that testing, even though everybody agreed this was a really good thing to do. The operational demands for their OT environment are so substantial that the idea of building a lab is just essentially unfathomable. And even though everybody says this is how we could get better, it's very tough for them to do it. And some of that is emerging technologies are moving very quickly. The other part of it is the stuff that really runs the environment, it's scarce. And building another one, it isn't possible. It's not possible anymore. And so we've sort of decided on these very small efforts to have simulation capacity. And they even though as an organization are fully committed to doing everything to make things better, they're struggling to be able to accomplish that. And I'm saying fully committed, they have resources to do it. So, financial resources to do it. And they're still having difficulty accomplishing that. And so smaller organizations or organizations without the executive funding support are going to be in a situation where it's not even going to be considered as a possibility of a thing to do. And there are a couple of other probable threads that we can go down related to this, but in theory, you should test things. In OT, you almost never can.
Yeah, I think this is the problem. I was going to ask you guys. You said it's hard to get visibility. How do you know it's working? But I was asking, is reality check, in OT, how different is it from IT SOC? Like maybe in IT SOC, you can prove things, like you said, by monitoring everything and every endpoint. But in OT, what do you monitor exactly? And what level in the Purdue model? What is blind? What is not? What you just mentioned, Cross? There is a block for companies. So how do we come over this? This big challenge in OT.
Since you mentioned Purdue model, I think that levels 1 and 2 are a blind spot for obvious reasons. You don't monitor serial links because you possibly could, but no one does it, basically. So we're usually monitoring at level 3, perhaps some network infrastructure, which is 3 to 2, but there it usually ends. But even this is usually better than nothing, because if you have engineering workstations and operator workstations wired up using, for example, Sysmon, which is or can be fairly lightweight, so you can get fairly detailed logs about what's happening on those endpoints, even without a specific EDR. That can give you quite a lot. Besides that, lots of companies, or significant portion of companies, those more mature and those with more resources, usually tend to buy purpose-built solutions for OT monitoring, which are capable of obviously giving fairly detailed view of at least what's happening on the network and perhaps on endpoints as well. So I would say that's usually the level where we're moving. Gentlemen, feel free to jump in and correct me if you've seen more.
I want to add something from a paradigm of approach of what security operations teams should be doing. So whatever technology you have at your disposal, it doesn't matter what it is, really. You should be thinking in the concept of operations of any problem, actual or potential. You should spend some time hunting, that is an approach to the data where you don't exactly know what you're looking for, but given the data that you do have, you start to identify things which are indicative that there's a problem. And when you do that, given the data that's available, you could find something that is a potential indicator. And as you start to learn that, given the data that you have available, then you can move that into the concept of detection engineering. Detection engineering is, given this data being present, this is how we would alert if we have this sort of anomaly. And so instead of taking as your concept of operations, oh, we're waiting for the technology that will arrive to give us the answers that there's a problem, it's really incumbent on the security team to say, let me look at what data I have. What is in the environment now? And what can I do with that, given my intellectual capacity, given my, interest in differentiating things, and whatever resources you have. This might be, a ChatGPT kind of thing. Hey, look at this data. Tell me what I could use as a statistical filter. What kind of machine learning algorithm could I construct to look at this? That sort of thinking process is not what cyber teams often do, but I think it's a really good concept of operations to grow into greater capability. Because once you start doing that and you start identifying the unknowns and the uncertainty and the lack of data, then you can make the argument for greater visibility wherever possible.
Right. Yeah. And just to circle back a little bit on the question, what's the essential difference between IT SOCs and OT SOCs? Now, from a high level perspective, they're not very different because they have they have the same goals basically. When they're doing the same things, they're delivering the same set of services. The thing is that there's certain challenges that are very specific to OT environments, which is covered by now the lack of having a testing environment, the lack of visibility at the lower levels of Purdue. Those are concrete challenges, and there's a couple more that we describe in the white paper as well. So it's more like, from a high level perspective, we're doing the same things, but we have very specific challenges, especially in OT environments, that just require a slightly different approach. The equipment that we deal with normally under IT, when something breaks, well, it's perhaps a little bit annoying, but something that we can quickly restore. If you break something in an OT environment, things can go horribly wrong. So you get the margin of error is less. We do things like automated response in IT environments. Oh, just isolate the endpoint, no issue. If it was something that ultimately was not really a threat, then okay. And then we just release the endpoint and we just apologize, basically. Better safe than sorry. Do that in OT environment and you'll break everything, basically. So there's lots of things you can't do as well. So there's lots of expertise that is required to do this OT part right, which also makes it difficult to engage with an MSSP. The MSSP, the OT that you have is probably very different from everyone else's OT. It's kind of unique. These environments are unique, and therefore challenging also for MSSPs who usually thrive on generic IT infrastructure, because they can do the same thing for all their customers and they can do it really well. This is completely different. So this is also where we see MSPs going into this domain, but it's a difficult domain to establish yourself in because of the variety, because of the challenges, the specific challenges of the environments.
Yeah, totally agree. So you think one of the requirements to do a proper SOC is you need the expertise of engineers with you, engineering. They should come on the team, right? To establish the baselining, like Chris said, you want to establish the baseline, what kind of data you need, maybe engineers with you, or who do you need to build a good SOC? If you could comment on that.
Honestly, I would say that what you just said would be the optimal starting point. However, not necessarily just for baselines, but for first of all discussion. What's the process like? What do you actually do? Because most SOCs, when you tell them, well, it's OT, they don't really understand the technology. Most SOC people who do IT work don't know the difference between an HMI and a PLC. Why should they? They've never seen it. So first of all, it's usually good to get the terminology in order. But after that, if you describe me what your process is like, we can do some sort of threat modeling and we can discuss what we can detect potentially and what we can't, because, for example, we don't have the visibility. So then we would develop use cases using, as you've said, engineers who know that process. This knowledge is necessary, but I would say this goes for IT as well. We just don't necessarily need engineers who do the work day to day. We have someone who is responsible for a specific asset, be it an application or server or a data center, who can tell us, well, it does this and you should detect this. If it does this, it's wrong, basically. So I would see this analogy being useful for OT work.
Okay.
And related to that, the engineer concept, I think we have engineers who are electrical engineers, chemical engineers, but then inside of cybersecurity, we have detection engineers, we have process engineers. So this is a team of people in different specialties that we need the engineering capacity. And in addition to the engineering aspect, including the systems engineering that goes into it for our information systems to support the cyber investigation capacity and instrumentation, we then also need analytical capability for people who can take the data that the engineers have decided is going to be available and how that will be delivered, and then make decisions about that in an investigative way. And that includes a whole bunch of intelligence information, historical information about the threats that we've observed, and speculation about what could potentially be affecting us. And to Rob's point, if you're going to try to leverage a third party and managed security service provider of some sort, you're essentially going to need to train them on almost all the stuff that you want them to do, which there's still a value to that. There still is a value to that because it transfers some institutional knowledge, but it's really challenging because it's an engineering effort, and asking a third party to do your engineering for you is oftentimes costly. So
yeah. So I mean, what do you expect from your SOC? Do you expect to see cyber issues, cyber threats, or also mechanical and like fault, process fault? What do you want to see exactly? I mean, do you build threat modeling based on both, or?
Honestly, I've never yet seen a SOC which would do process monitoring as well as security monitoring. In theory, you could probably build such an operations center, but to my mind, it's similar to IT network operation centers and security operation centers. The reason why they are usually two distinct entities is that both require specific domain knowledge, and I would say the same holds for OT as well. I wouldn't want to pay for SOC analysts who are capable of monitoring my OT environment from the process standpoint any more than I would like to pay for OT engineers who would be willing and capable of doing the security work as well, besides their expertise. But gentlemen, feel free to correct me.
I actually have some thoughts on this. First of all, my opinion is cybersecurity has been pulled out of IT, information systems, because it needed an opportunity to grow up. And when it gets embedded inside of IT specifically, or if we're talking about a narrow OT concept, it never really gets the space for it to emerge as capable. Okay. And so I think that I think that long term, and I'm talking about decades wise long term, it will reconverge. Cybersecurity will simply be a facet of everything related to information systems of all types, but we need decades of maturity and increasing capability for that to happen. Now, that being said, I have actually, for a customer, done a design of a converged network and operations, non-OT specific, but actually like continent wide. Was the area of responsibility for this entity, and they called it a NOSC, Network and Operations Security Center. And what I did, to Jan's point, in terms of the role specifications, as cybersecurity became a responsibility of every role for everything. And then there was cybersecurity specializations, which delivered detection engineering so that the monitoring analyst could make a decision based on the operational or the cybersecurity impact of that particular detection. This is not something that's common. And the only times that I've seen it is when an organization has large enough domain of responsibility and already enough funding and capability maturity that they're starting to optimize in order to be able to have this specific initial preliminary investigation, like what you're talking about. Oh, do I look for the operational detect with the same staff that are looking for the cyber detect? Until you have those detections so well engineered that you can give somebody enough insight and information in some sort of a view that they can make a preliminary decision in 10 or 15 minutes, that optimization of convergence, you're just not ready for it. That's my opinion. That's my opinion on it, based on some things that I've seen. So
okay, it's interesting, Chris, because I wasn't aware of. It's an interesting concept to mix the both. Usually we tend to separate. We just say, okay, this is availability, so it's operational, and therefore we don't do anything with it. From information security, from an information security point of view, we've got the CIA trying. It's confidentiality, integrity, and availability. So we should be concerned with all of these things when it comes to information security. But the SOC generally, because the SOC is sometimes referred to as a cyber SOC. So most of the SOCs have a very strong focus of anything that's cyber related. So any incident cyber related, also availability incidents cyber related, but anything just operational availability. It's usually not part of responsibilities of the SOC, but it sits somewhere else. For example, that could be like the NOC, where they just do the monitoring. They do the operational monitoring of the firewalls, make sure the capacity is there, make sure these things are up and running, make sure that these things are when one firewall fails, there's a redundancy in place. That's all part of the network operations center. And then the security operations center comes in when there's a DDoS attack on those firewalls, for example. And that sort of thing, that's how the separation usually works. And you can converge, but this is also the reason why I would say the SOC has a very specific responsibility regarding monitoring of cyber threats. In most cases, you don't want to mix that with other types of responsibilities. You want to have that clear separation. So that's good focus. You have a complete focus on cyber-related threats and nothing else. Because otherwise, if you would do like regular OT monitoring, include that as well. There's two different areas of expertise that you're trying to combine in these people, which is probably also, knowledge-wise, is going to be very challenging as well.
What I meant, but for example, if there is a Modbus function detected, like a right function, is it the SOC's responsibility? That's what I meant. That could maybe issued by maybe internal or external. So is this classified as cyber, or it's not your responsibility? Like, that's what I meant.
I think that's one of the things which Rob and Chris both alluded to beforehand. It can be. It depends on how you've decided to hand out the competencies and how your threat model was devised, which then says to SOC, you should monitor for this. Can we, from a technical standpoint, see if a rogue endpoint has just sent a right Modbus message to an endpoint? Yes, we can. We have devices which are capable of telling SOC this has happened and this is a potential issue. But it depends on the detection. Someone would first have to set up that industrial firewall or IPS or what have you and say, this is something you should alert on because this shouldn't happen. So in some cases that I've seen, yes, OTSOC had this capability and had this responsibility, but it was fairly, I don't want to say basic because this isn't necessarily a basic level of detection, but it was fairly easily done from the standpoint of what we usually have in IT. It was just, if a write signal comes from any other IP than this one, then a SOC should know about it and should investigate why this happened, because it shouldn't happen during normal circumstances. So at this level, I would say, yes, this could be a fairly well-defined responsibility for a SOC in terms of monitoring.
And just to add on to that, so it kind of depends on how you define your use cases. This could be a very specific use case, monitoring use case. So that basically that use case tells you what you're going to be monitoring for. And this is a very specific signal. The question is, can the SOC itself interpret the event completely? Like, can they make the distinction between this is something that's malicious or benign? Or do we need them to say, okay, we've got the alert. Now let's go to the engineers and ask them to explain what's happened. And this is usually the case. So the SOC can do the detection, but still the engineers will do the interpretation, the ultimate interpretation, because they have more knowledge of these systems, and they have a better understanding of what's currently going on.
And
yes, go ahead.
I was just going to add on to that. It becomes the responsive action as the initial. There are different terms that people use. I use deconfliction. Some people use triage or validation. Mm-hmm. As soon as you get some signal, there's some work to be done in order to do that. And the SOC wants to look at that, but oftentimes lacks the complete operational insight to be able to make that decision on their own, which is what Rob was saying. But it's part of the investigative process after some sort of a detection occurs.
Yeah. Okay. So obviously, you know, when you see some strange or some traffic that you don't make sense of it, you should ask maybe the engineers, like you said, to make sense of it. So Jan, you said something about open source, right? What open source? Or am I mistaken?
Oh, that would be me. So I was.
Oh, you are the open source guy.
Yeah.
Huh?
I was referring to the Soc-Cmm model as an open source standard. So that's what I was referring to, because it's something that you can just pick up from the website and just go through this. It's basically a questionnaire where you can just go through and evaluate yourself. There's some guidance built into the tool as well. That you can that will help you choose the right value. So it will give you a bit of insight into how you're operating, what the weak points are, what the strong points are, what the things are that you should be focusing on. So this is more from a because there's a technical perspective as well. So we deal with technology, we look at technical capabilities as well. But it's mostly, I would say, mostly more from a process view. I think that's probably the right way to summarize it. But we try to make a good mixture of looking at this process that exists within the SOC, but also looking at the concrete capabilities that you're able to deliver. So it's those are the two components basically of the model. We've got maturity, which is more process related, and then we've got capability. So what are you actually able to do as a SOC? And if you look at an IT SOC and an OT SOC, there's probably a lot less you can do within the OT SOC because capabilities are limited due to limitations in visibility, limitations in technology, limitations in responsibility. So as we were saying, incident response, you can't just do like automated response in OT environments. Usually the actual response is done by the engineers and not by the SOC at all. So you just initiate a process. So that's where the differences are. So in terms of maturity, you will get probably a similar picture for the IT and OT SOC if you run it in the same way. But in terms of capability, there will definitely be differences.
Yeah, if you could share with me the link, the open source link, please, later. I could put it in the description for this video.
Oh, please. Yeah, sure. So it's actually soc-cmm.com. It's quite easy to remember.
Could you type it in the chat, please?
I will.
Thanks. Or on LinkedIn, whatever. Anytime. Thank you. Okay. So, I mean, for a particular organization, when do you think they need a SOC? At what maturity level? Like, is it when they start, or is it how much they should be to get to build a SOC?
Interesting, because we had I was just doing a training this week, a new training. This was actually one of the things that we discussed. One of the preconditions for a SOC. Are there any preconditions? And we kind of looked at different angles, like does the organization itself need to have a certain level of maturity? Does there need to be a certain level of security maturity? Does there need to be an ISMS in place? Do you need to have asset management? Now, what kind of things do you need in place in order to deploy a SOC? And I would say there's not necessarily one thing, but if you don't have security maturity or organization maturity or an ISMS or asset management, then I would say, the SOC is probably not the first thing you should be concerned with. The first thing you should be put in place some good preventative controls, and then we'll talk about detection and response later on. So that's my opinion, but I think Chris also has an opinion on this.
Well, I'd cast it a different way. I would say that when you have information systems, you need appropriate security monitoring and responsive capability. Whether the level of sophistication is having a SOC for that or not, I think the demark is simply, can your organization justify that it needs customization to do the things that you as an organization want to do? Because otherwise you should just be leveraging the cloud-based detections and the built-in, endpoint monitoring and responsive capability. But it's not until you can justify the nuanced customization that it goes over the threshold into having security operations. But nonetheless, as soon as you have an information system in your organization, you need security for that information system. So that's the way that I think about it.
Yeah, it's talking in terms of capabilities. You need a certain capability, but you don't necessarily need to deliver that capability with a SOC. There's other ways to deliver it as well. And if you're not ready to go for a full-blown SOC, then doing just things like for example, just an EDR agent as a starting point would be a great thing, because it has integrated detection and response capability. So this also already gives you a good head start, I would say, without having the need of having a SOC. You'll probably want to monitor some of the output of that, but that doesn't necessarily need to be a SOC. So talking about it in capabilities rather than in entities is probably a better way to approach this. And also, one of the things that we also discussed and our conclusion was, maybe there's no preconditions, because if you have these capabilities, they can also help you to get your maturity up to speed, up to par. They can help increase the maturity. If you don't have good asset management, then one of the things that the SOC could do is asset identification as part of their vulnerability management. So it can actually help you to set up and increase the maturity of some of the missing capabilities that you currently have. So it can also be an enabler.
Great. So have you seen companies that, you said you have seen companies that they have the resources? Do they have the not just the money? Do they have the people resources as well, like ready to run the SOCs, or just?
I would say resources need to be everything. I don't know if but the resources includes of course budgets, but it also includes the people resources as well, because that's, I think, the main thing. You can't run a SOC without the people. They're really central. The quality of these people is absolutely going to be the major point for the quality of the output of the SOC. If you don't have the right expertise in-house, then you're just not going to have a very trustworthy and a very reliable and high quality output SOC. So it's I would say probably the most important thing, having the right people in place, and sourcing them is challenging, I would say.
I think that is a huge challenge. The other huge challenge is, if you want to add security operations capability, building it is actually a different set of staff than running it. And finding that expertise to bring somebody in to build it oftentimes takes the form of a consulting engagement, third party, and most of the people who have that expertise also have a vested interest in you procuring their managed security services going into the future. So it's an interesting situation. There's such scarcity around that expertise that it really when organizations want it, it almost always pushes them down a certain channel of that procurement process.
Yeah, and I think that's even more true for it's true for any SOC, but it's even more true for SOC looking for cybersecurity analysts with OT expertise. That's such a niche. I think that's really hard for these people. So it's probably easier to do to get a general cybersecurity analyst on board and then train them for the specific environment. So that makes much more sense than trying to source the specific expertise you're looking for, because you're probably not going to find it.
So you train them, and you the cybersecurity people to get ready.
Yeah, I think that it's almost always the organization commits to becoming a learning organization of sorts. We're going to develop this expertise in-house. We're going to grow our capability and maturity, and it's going to take us several years. And we know that that's the growing pain of adding this capacity.
What do you think of the current market of SOC right now in OT? How is it doing? Is it what's the niche? Are you doing niche things, or?
I think that this will be fairly distinctive regionally. I'm from Central Europe. I know of several SOCs that do offer OT monitoring besides IT monitoring as well. They do both. Some of them do it well. Some of them I would probably not engage in monitoring my own environment. But definitely there are SOCs, at least on the European market, who are capable of doing the work hypothetically. Gentlemen, feel free to jump in and tell me what's it like in other jurisdictions and other places.
So I'll speak briefly to North America. There is a lot of capacity, a lot of expertise, a lot of development, and there have been a number of inglorious failures that you can observe in the news media of OT specifically being violated. So just it's a mixed environment in terms of capacity and readiness. And this is in an area that's largely considered a leading area of capacity on the cyber OT specific front.
Yeah. Okay. What about the Middle East? Are you guys, have you dealt with the Middle East before, or?
Yeah, I think so. I have a couple of support partners in the Middle East, and some of these are also looking into. Mostly of these are actually MSSPs delivering SOC services. So they're also looking into, can we do SOC service delivery specifically for OT environments, because there is a demand. Everyone sees the need for security operations, but not everyone has the capacity to build a security operations center in-house. So you need to go to these MSSPs, and then MSSPs have the specific challenges that we already discussed. So many MSSPs are looking to get into this domain because of the demand from the customers. It's a very understandable demand. We are living in a, I would say, dangerous world. So also from a cyber perspective, the whole current situation is a mixture of things happening in the physical domain as well as in the cyber domain, and these things are just converging, especially in OT. So the need for it and the importance of it is obvious, I think.
Yeah. And I'll just speak to it briefly. I work in the Gulf GCC countries in a number of different ways as a trainer. The training delivery. I have done consulting engagements for a number of different types of organizations, MSSP, a government entity that was seeking to establish a regional security operations capacity in order to support all of the government entities within that within their jurisdiction. I've worked with a couple of different companies doing maturity assessment work for that. So this is something that I see a lot of work being done in the area in the GCC area generally, in Levant and some related sort of countries where there's a realization that this is a vector into the environment that can be damaging, but also catastrophic in some of the manifestations of it. So I think that that's the current temperature that I feel related to the security operations in the Gulf region generally.
Nice. Okay. Do you think AI could help? Or have you been asked about this? I know it's a trendy topic, but
can I just mention something?
Sure.
I have to go because I have another meeting.
Sure, no problem.
So I'm sorry if this ruins the recording aspect of it, but
no. We're gonna wrap up in a few minutes. It's been an hour, almost 55 minutes now, so we're almost done now. In 5-10 minutes, okay.
I'll give the one first regarding AI in security operations. Go ahead, Dave.
Okay, I would say that as in most areas in security operations, we obviously see a lot of push for using AI-enabled solutions and AI-based solutions. To my mind, the same applies in all areas of human endeavor. AI can be a good helper, but at this point in time, it probably won't replace your trusted and knowledgeable people. So where it helps in security operations already quite a lot is, as Chris, for example, mentioned, how can we detect this? I have this sort of event. I want to create detections. Help me. And the AI can then help you develop an appropriate algorithm to detect that specific event and that specific area. So that's one of the parts where AI is already helpful. The other one where I feel it helps quite a lot is helping more junior members of security operations centers gain some higher level of analytical capability. And this can apply to OT as well if the AI model is trained on the specific local responsible area. So if you have this specifically trained model and you have detection which says, well, here we've seen a Modbus write attempt, what should I do? If I'm an L1 junior analyst, I probably don't know what Modbus is, much less why write should be wrong from this endpoint. But perhaps this AI model could help me and could give me the ability to react to it as an L2 analyst would in a normal SOC. So it helps us to gain more or higher level of knowledge from junior people.
Right, and I think you're absolutely right, Jan. And to add on to that, AI has been in security operations for a long time. AI has been embedded into security products for a long time. It's just the hype is around the large language models, the Gen AI. We've been using AI to create baselines in machine learning and all those algorithms. We've been doing that for ages. So the new thing is just the co-pilots and the LLMs and Gen AI and that sort of thing. And what we're seeing here is that we have quite a big landscape. So there's a site called Guardians of the Machine Age, and this lists all kinds of AI vendors. And just in the AI SOC space, there's over 100 of vendors listed there, and that's just a portion. I think. I think there's some good research done, but there's also very small companies doing their own AI SOC things. So it's probably a multitude of that. So many different approaches, so many different ways of adding value, trying to add value to the SOC. Some of these really promising, some of these not so much. So it's a difficult landscape to navigate at the moment. And if we look, this was one of the questions in the survey as well. So we asked, do you get any practical value from using the SOC, from using AI in your SOC? At the moment, the large majority says yes, some value, but it's not quite at the level that we're going to replace people and all of that. So it's not going to do that for us just yet. But that's the direction in which we're going, and that's an undeniable direction. So that's going to be reality in a couple of years from now. But we're not quite at that stage just yet.
So if I can comment on that, what my research has shown is that people are using it as an individual contribution. They're using it to support their individual work, but it's not fully integrated into the workflows as this is the way that we will work. And then there's a Hacker News article that I wrote that grouped the uses of AI. So there's a technology approach to it, but just there's sort of like a conceptual approach. And the big buckets that I use for detection engineering, largely machine learning focused, threat hunting, machine learning plus the GPTs and the LLMs, software development and analysis, being able to very quickly create scripts to do a thing that otherwise would have taken a person hours, or they couldn't have done it all. Now, all of a sudden, you can say, write me a PowerShell script that does this, 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 and this, and it is a substantial expediter for analysts. The larger concept of automation and orchestration in order to integrate a number of different systems and perform actions and have the decisions about thresholding be fuzzy instead of rigorous, and make decisions about what to do. That's something that AI can actually be leveraged for. And then the other thing that I think that a lot of people forget about is the reporting and communication. And that alone, especially in the domain of cybersecurity, where cybersecurity analysts tend to be deficient at communicating the importance of the information that they've found, leveraging a tool that will take the details and your message and refine it in order to communicate it effectively is really quite valuable. So those are the buckets that I would put the actions of how AI can help us right now. So.
Right. So yeah, just to add on to that, just briefly, Chris, what you're explaining here very well is just this task-based approach to implementing AI. Just look at it from a case-by-case basis. Does it make sense to add some form of AI to this specific task? And just can create a list of tasks within the SOC and then determine what value are we going to get out of it when we implement some form of AI in this. That's probably the best way to go forward instead of trying to put in some product that's going to replace a complete function within the SOC, because that's just we're not quite at that point yet. So what specific tasks are we going to be replacing or augmenting? And at the moment, it's mostly augmenting using AI, accelerating it, making it more accurate, making it faster. That's where the benefits are.
Yep, I totally agree. So when will you release the paper?
It's just been released, so it's now available on the website. And if you go to the Soc-Cmm website and go to the section that is called the library, basically the best practices and white papers, then it's right there. The white paper called Assessing and Maturing OT SOCs that we've all been working on together.
Oh, okay. Anything else, guys, you would like to share before we wrap up?
No, thank you for the opportunity to discuss it. It's an important topic. Thank you.
Thank you for coming by, and really appreciate it. Basim, my friend, he didn't tell me that I will be interviewing you guys, so it's quite a shock, but nice shock. It's a nice one, because when I saw, below, 3, I said, what, but it's good. It's cool. I really enjoyed talking with you guys and get to know you. Thank you very much. And so I think that's it. I think we have to wrap up now. Guys, thank you for watching this episode. I hope you enjoyed my talk with my guest, Rob, Jan, and Chris. Hopefully see you next time. Bye-bye.